Wife's affair partner showed up at our anniversary dinner pretending to be a delivery guy and called her darling in front of me and our kids just so she could compare us and see if I'd fight for her. My name is Conrad. I'm 37 years old, and I've lived in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia for most of my life. I work as a park ranger, which means quiet days, long hikes, and knowing how to fix just about anything with duct tape and elbow grease. That life suits me just fine. I don't need much. But I'll admit, I poured everything I had into this one night. It was our 15th wedding anniversary, and I wanted it to be special. Not flashy, not fancy, just something that felt like us. The kids were already bouncing off the walls by the time I lit the last candle on the back porch. Max, our 13-year-old, had helped me string up the paper lanterns, though he got more tangled in them than anything else. Jonah, who was 10, spent most of the afternoon sneaking chocolate chips from the cake batter when he thought I wasn't looking. "Dad, it smells amazing out here," Max said, tugging at my sleeve. "Are we really eating on the porch tonight?" I nodded. "Only the finest for my favorite crew." Jonah grinned. "Even Mom?" "Especially Mom," I said, smiling at both of them. Lillian came out of the house right then, barefoot, with her smartwatch lighting up on her wrist. Her eyes flicked to the screen, then to the setup on the porch. "You really went all out," she said, her voice soft but not quite present. I handed her the wooden carving I'd been working on for weeks in the garage. A red maple tree, hand-carved, polished, and sealed. Our initials, C+L, etched in the trunk with a tiny heart. "It's beautiful," she said, brushing her fingers over it. "Thank you." But there was a pause before she said it. A flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. She didn't hug me, didn't kiss my cheek. Just smiled, distant, like someone checking a box. Then the watch buzzed again, and she was already glancing down. "You need to take that?" I asked. She looked up too quickly. "What?" "No, just checking on something. I'll be right back." She stepped down the porch steps and disappeared around the side of the house, phone in hand. She did that 3 more times before dessert, always the same excuse, always the same distracted air. I should have said something, but I didn't. In fact, I told myself she was planning some sort of surprise. Maybe a gift. Maybe something romantic of her own. Why else would she be so secretive? This was just nerves, I figured. She'd been weird about anniversaries before. Besides, the kids were laughing, asking me to cut bigger slices of cake, making fun of how my shirt still smelled like cedar from the garage. They didn't see the way Lillian kept stepping away. They just saw the fairy lights, the homemade meal, and the cake that I barely managed not to burn. It should have been a perfect night. I wanted it to be. But looking back, I can't stop thinking about the way she kept touching that watch. Like it was the only thing in the world trying to reach her. And I wasn't. It was just past 8 when the doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen rinsing dessert plates when it happened sharp, quick, like the ding of a game show buzzer. I barely had time to set down the sponge before Lillian moved. She was out of her chair and across the living room like someone had hit fast forward. "I've got it," she called out, her voice too bright. The boys were still on the back porch, laughing over a game of cards Jonah had brought out. I followed slowly, towel in hand, expecting some late Amazon drop-off or maybe a neighbor with a stray dog again. But when I rounded the corner, I stopped in my tracks. There was a man standing at the door. He wore a dark green polo with a logo on the chest, some landscaping company I didn't recognize, and held a wicker basket wrapped in cellophane. It was filled with cheese, crackers, a bottle of wine, and 2 crystal glasses. Not the kind of thing you pick up from the local grocery store. The man himself looked maybe early 40s, clean-cut, tanned, and confident. "For the beautiful couple," he said, smiling as he handed the basket to Lillian. "Happy anniversary." She took it like it weighed nothing. "Thank you," she said quickly, her voice low. Then he leaned in slightly, still smiling, and added just loud enough to carry, "You look radiant tonight, darling." I froze. My brain tried to play catch-up. Did I just hear that right? Behind me, Max had come inside and was standing by the hallway, his face scrunched in confusion. Jonah stepped in right after, still clutching a half-eaten cookie. Lillian laughed. Not a real laugh. The kind that's meant to smooth over something messy. "Okay, thanks for the delivery," she said, trying to steer him away from the threshold. The man didn't move. He looked past her, straight at me. "You must be Conrad," he said. "Lucky guy." I stepped forward. "And you are?" He smirked. "Just a friend. I work with Lillian. She's a smokin' garden goddess, isn't she?" Garden goddess. It landed like a slap. I glanced at Lillian, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. She tucked a piece of hair behind her ear and started fidgeting with the ribbon on the basket. "I think you should leave," I said evenly. The man's smile widened, but he didn't argue. "Of course. My mistake." He tipped an imaginary hat and turned, whistling as he walked back down the path toward a white work truck parked along the gravel. The second the door shut, silence dropped like a stone. Jonah looked up at me. "Why did that guy talk to Mom like that?" Max's voice came next, lower, more pointed. "Mom, do you know him?" Lillian opened her mouth, but no words came out. She just turned away and busied herself with the plastic wrap on the basket. I was still standing there, trying to calm the pounding in my chest. This wasn't just some vendor dropping off wine. This man knew her. Spoke to her like there was a joke only the two of them were in on. And he knew it was our anniversary. Something was off. And the boys had seen it, too. What I had meant to be a quiet, joyful evening had cracked wide open. And suddenly, nothing felt steady anymore. As soon as the boys settled into the den with a movie, I walked back toward the foyer, where Lillian was still fiddling with the ribbon on the basket like it might unravel some excuse. I stood there for a second, trying to rein in my voice. I didn't want to shout. Not with the boys just a room away. But I couldn't pretend everything was fine, either. Who was that guy, Lil? I asked. She didn't look at me. Just kept her eyes on the bottle of wine nestled inside the cellophane. He's no one. Just a delivery guy from a client's landscaping project. Probably got too familiar. I didn't expect him to show up like that. I blinked. He knew it was our anniversary. She shrugged. Maybe he heard me mention it at work. And he called you darling. Then garden goddess. That sound like a normal delivery to you. She finally looked up. I sharp now. Are you really doing this tonight? On our anniversary? I'm asking you a question. Well, I'm telling you, she snapped, stepping back and crossing her arms. I didn't invite him. I didn't know he was going to say anything like that. He's just some guy from the Botanical Center's outreach program. I did a few volunteer hours with him. That's it. Then why'd you jump to answer the door like you were expecting him? I wasn't. Lil, come on, I said, softer now. Something's off. He didn't just wander over here with gourmet cheese by accident. He knew you. He looked at you like. She cut me off. Don't start spinning stories in your head, Conrad. This is exactly why I didn't want to make tonight a big thing. I knew something would set you off. I felt my jaw tighten. Set me off? I'm asking a simple question about a man who showed up at our door and talked to my wife like they were dating. He was just being inappropriate, she said. I'm not responsible for how some guy behaves. I stared at her. She was too calm, too defensive. Not angry, exactly, more like annoyed. You're saying he did all that on his own, I said slowly. And you didn't encourage it? At all. She threw her hands up. God, Conrad. I'm telling you the truth, and you're accusing me of what? Cheating? Flirting? What exactly do you want to hear? I didn't know what I wanted to hear. Only that I hadn't heard it yet. I rubbed a hand over my face. The boys are confused. So am I. Then stop confusing them, she snapped. Don't drag them into something that isn't a big deal. I took a breath. Long and slow. I didn't believe her. Not really. But I wasn't going to fight in front of the kids. Not tonight. Fine, I said, finally. But we're not done with this. She turned back toward the kitchen without a word. And I stood there, alone in the hallway, wondering when exactly our anniversary turned into a minefield. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise and quietly slipped out of bed. Lillian didn't stir. She had fallen asleep curled toward the edge of the mattress like she couldn't stand the idea of even brushing against me. Not that I tried. I made coffee in the dark kitchen, the old percolator chugging away like it had a grudge. Then I sat at the table, stared at my phone, and typed in the name I'd seen on the man's uniform. West Haven Landscape and Botanical Services. The woman who answered sounded half asleep. Hey ma'am, I said. I'm calling to ask about a delivery made last night around 8 p.m. to a home outside Crozet. Basket of wine and cheese. Guy in one of your uniforms? She cleared her throat. We don't do deliveries like that. Just maintenance and garden installations. You sure? This man said he was with your company. Dark green polo, your logo on it. No, sir. We don't send staff out for private deliveries, and nobody was scheduled to be near Crozet yesterday. Could be someone borrowed one of our shirts. Happens. Got it, I said, my stomach turning. Thanks. I sat there for a long minute, staring out the window at the pine trees swaying in the breeze. I knew now. I had known last night, really, but I guess I needed someone else to say it. By the time the boys came down for breakfast, I was already dressed. I waited until they were busy with cereal and cartoons before I pulled Lillian aside in the hallway. We need to talk. She sighed immediately. I already told you. No, you didn't. I called that company. The one on his shirt. They said they don't send out deliveries, and nobody was scheduled near us. She looked away. Okay, fine. I blinked. That's it. She shifted her weight. He wasn't from that company. I asked him to wear that shirt so it wouldn't look suspicious. I just stared at her. He's a friend from the Botanical Center. His name is Bryce. I thought it might be a nice gesture. Something light. A surprise. A surprise? I said flatly. I didn't think he'd say what he did, she added quickly. He went off script. What script, Lil? You asked him to show up here on our anniversary with wine and call you darling in front of our children? She flinched. I didn't plan that part. Look, it wasn't supposed to be a thing. But it is, I said. You lied. Last night, you lied to me. And now you're trying to spin it like it was some harmless mix-up. She crossed her arms. I didn't cheat on you. I didn't say you did. But you invited another man to our anniversary dinner, and you let him act like you were a couple. I didn't think it would come off that way, she whispered. I leaned back against the wall, arms folded. That's a lie too. Her face twisted, and tears welled in her eyes. She wiped at them fast, like she didn't want to give me the satisfaction. I just wanted to feel something, she said. I don't know. I nodded slowly. Well, congratulations. You succeeded. She said nothing else. And I realized then, I wasn't just suspicious anymore. I was certain. Something between us had cracked open, and I didn't know if it could be closed again. That evening, after the boys were asleep and the house had gone still, I sat at the kitchen table again. Same spot as this morning, same bitter coffee now cold. The wood grain was worn smooth under my fingers, a reminder of the life I thought we were still living. Lillian stood in the doorway, arms folded across her chest, like she was ready for a fight or a confession. We need to finish this, I said quietly. She didn't move. There's nothing else to say. There's everything to say. Because right now, you're pretending this is all just a misunderstanding. But it's not. So tell me the truth. She looked down, her fingers tightening around the edge of her sweater sleeve. You already know it. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to help her out of this one. She finally walked over and sat across from me, eyes fixed on the grain of the table. His name is Bryce. I met him at the Botanical Center. He was assigned to a greenhouse restoration project I was helping with. We started talking. It was light at first, jokes, shared music, silly things. I stayed quiet. It wasn't physical, she said quickly. I swear to you. It never crossed that line. I raised an eyebrow, but it crossed others. Her mouth twitched. We'd text, sometimes for hours. I'd go to the center early just to have coffee with him. We'd vent about our lives, talk about our marriages. He said his wife doesn't understand him. I told him you don't talk much anymore. So you bonded over how disappointing we are, I said flatly. She winced, but didn't argue. So why bring him here? I asked. Why not just keep it secret like every other emotional affair? She looked up then, really looked at me. And what I saw there wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. It was confusion. I didn't know how to choose, she said. I stared at her, confused. Choose what? Between you and him, she whispered. And that's when it hit me. The truth didn't slide in quietly, it slammed into my chest like a steel beam. You brought him here to see how I'd react. She didn't deny it. You invited him to our anniversary, I said slowly, to see which of us, me or him, would make you feel something. She nodded, barely. My throat tightened. You used our kids. You used our home. You used me to test your feelings. I wanted to see if you'd fight for me, she said, her voice shaking. If you'd get jealous. If you'd look at me like you used to. And when he flirted like that, I thought, maybe you'd finally get angry, show me I still mattered. I stared at her. You wanted me to compete for you? I didn't know what else to do, she said, wiping her cheek. We felt distant for so long. I wanted to know who I am to you now. Or if you even see me anymore. You're my wife, I said. You've always been my wife. But now? After this? I shook my head. You turned our anniversary into an experiment. She started crying harder, but I didn't comfort her. I couldn't. I felt like I'd been stabbed with something dull. Not enough to kill, but deep enough to change everything. I stood slowly. You should go to bed. Conrad. No, I said. I heard what I needed. I left her there, crying into her hands at our kitchen table, the same one we'd eaten dinner at for over a decade. But nothing about it felt like home anymore. The next morning, I didn't make coffee. I didn't start breakfast or pack the boys' lunches. I just sat at the edge of the bed staring at my boots, the same ones I wore every day to work, the same ones Lillian once said smelled like pine and smoke, like you. Now they just felt heavy. When I walked into the kitchen, Lillian was already up. Her face was blotchy, her eyes red and tired. She was sipping from her favorite mug, the blue one with the cracked handle. She looked up, but I didn't speak. I just turned toward the hallway and told Max and Jonah to pack a small bag. Are we going somewhere? Max asked, standing at the top of the stairs. Yeah, I said. We're going to stay with Aunt Rena for a few days. Jonah looked over the banister. What about school? I already called her. I lied. She'll help with rides. Lillian stood. Conrad, please. I didn't stop walking. I opened the hall closet, pulled out the old duffel bag, and began folding clothes. The boys moved quietly, unsure but not asking too many questions. They could feel it. The shift. The tension. Kids always do. In the doorway, Lillian's voice broke. Don't do this. I didn't look at her. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to drag the boys into a fight. But I'm not staying here, either. Not after what you did. She stepped forward. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I was lost, Conrad. I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to feel something again. I zipped the bag shut. You humiliated me, I said quietly. In our home. In front of our children. You let another man treat our marriage like a joke. And for what? Some emotional game you weren't brave enough to admit to until after you'd already played it. I didn't sleep with him. That's not the point. She started crying again. I didn't know what else to do. I thought maybe if you saw someone else interested in me, it would make you care again. I turned to her, my voice calm but flat. You wanted me to fight for you. But I'm not going to fight someone who you already invited into the ring. I'm not going to beg to be loved by someone who had to test it in front of the kids. Her lip trembled. Don't leave. Don't take them. I'm not taking them, I said. I'm giving them space from this. From whatever this is. They don't need to watch their parents pretend everything's fine while the floor rots out from under them. Jonah came in with his backpack. Can I bring Scout? Yeah, buddy, I said, ruffling his hair. We'll bring Scout. Max was already standing near the door, his expression serious, more adult than I'd seen in a long time. Lillian reached for my arm. Can we please just slow down? Maybe go to therapy? We can fix this. I looked at her for a long second. Some things don't need fixing. Some things just need ending. And I meant it. The weight had shifted. My heart didn't feel shattered. It felt still. The boys followed me out to the truck. As I loaded their bags in the back seat, I felt my phone buzz. A text from my mom. Heard something happened. Please call before you do anything drastic. Too late. The next morning, I filed for divorce. People said I was moving too fast. Friends from church. My mother. Even my supervisor at the ranger station. They all meant well. But they hadn't stood there in the same house where I carved our names into wood and watched their partner invite someone else to see how that would feel. I didn't need more time. I needed peace. It didn't take long for Lillian to start rewriting the story. I heard about it from my sister Rena first. She called me 2 days after the boys and I moved in, her voice cautious, like she was trying not to push too hard. She's telling people it was just a vendor who got too flirty, Rena said. That you overreacted. I sat on the edge of her guest bed, folding Jonah's t-shirts into a neat stack. Of course she is. She said he was a guy from some gardening center who didn't realize it was your anniversary. That he made a joke, and you flipped out and embarrassed her in front of the kids. I almost laughed. She really said that? She's already told Mom and Aunt Denise. Probably half the ladies from the PDA by now. I didn't respond right away. My hands were still, resting on a blue Spider-Man shirt that still smelled like our house. I figured you should know, Rena said softly. I do, I replied. But I'm not playing defense. I'm just going to tell the truth. So that's what I did. I called Lillian's parents, her dad first. I didn't give them a dramatic speech. Just explained what happened. I told them about the man who showed up, the lies she told, and what she later admitted. I didn't add anything extra. I didn't have to. Her father was silent for a long time. She said it was all a misunderstanding, he finally muttered. It wasn't. He didn't argue. After that, I let the truth move on its own. I didn't chase people down or make public posts. I just answered questions honestly. A few of our mutual friends reached out, wanting both sides. I gave them mine. Calm. Direct. Without theatrics. And bit by bit, things shifted. People stopped responding to Lillian's social media photos. Her phone calls to my mom went unreturned. At Jonah's soccer practice, a couple of the other parents who used to flock to her now barely nodded hello. But what hit hardest was Max. He refused to go to her house when her custody week came up. She lied to you, he said plainly one afternoon, sitting next to me on Rena's back deck. She lied to all of us. She's still your mom, I said, because it felt like the right thing to say. She made me feel like you were the crazy one, he said. But I saw her. I saw the way she looked at that guy. He didn't say anything else. Just stared out at the trees like he'd aged a year in a week. I didn't push him. Instead, I focused on routine, making sure they had clean clothes, packing lunches, checking homework, walking the dog. I kept things steady, not perfect, but predictable. They needed that. Lillian kept spinning her version. But fewer people believed it now. Because the truth has a way of standing still while the lies run in circles. It was a Thursday night, right after sunset, when I saw him again. I'd stopped by the Deer Hollow Tavern, a quiet place tucked behind the old post office downtown. I wasn't looking for a confrontation, just needed a drink. Some air. A place where nobody was asking me if I was okay every 5 minutes. But there he was, Bryce, sitting at the far end of the bar with a local craft beer in his hand, in that same smug, I own the room kind of posture. I stared at him for a few seconds, debating. Then I walked up to the bar, sat one stool away, and set my phone on the counter, screen down, but already recording. He noticed me right away. Well, damn, he said with a crooked grin. If it isn't Ranger Rick. I didn't smile. It's Conrad. He gave a slow nod. Right. Sorry about the show at your house. Bit of a misunderstanding, huh? Was it? He shrugged and took a sip. Honestly, I didn't know the kids were gonna be there. Thought it'd just be her. I wouldn't have said that stuff if I knew they were around. But you still would have come. He glanced at me. She invited me. That was what I needed. Confirmation. But I didn't stop there. She told me you were just a friend from the botanical center, I said. That you were part of some outreach program. Bryce snorted. Outreach? No, man. We were close. Not in a we hooked up kind of way, but, late night texts. Calls. We talked a lot. That's what she needed. What she needed, I repeated. And what did she tell you about me? He hesitated, then looked me dead in the eye. She said you didn't talk to her anymore. That you were distant. Emotionally checked out. That she felt invisible. I stayed silent. She told me the marriage was basically over, he added. Said she didn't know how to leave without blowing up the family. Yet she stayed. Yeah, he said, shifting in his seat. She said she wanted to see which one of us made her feel more. I don't know. Chosen. I looked down at the glass in my hand. She said that. He nodded. Pretty much. Said if you showed fire, that maybe it'd mean something. And if you didn't, well, then she'd know she was already gone. I leaned back. So you were her test? He smiled thinly. Seems that way. I grabbed my phone and hit stop on the recording. Bryce raised an eyebrow. You recording me? Yep. He shook his head, but didn't look angry. Just tired. Figures. Don't worry, I said. I'm not sending it to the news. Just my attorney. Bryce took another sip of beer. I liked her. I really did. But I don't do drama, man. I didn't sign up to be some pawn in a marriage experiment. You were, I said. We all were. I stood to leave. Hey, Conrad, he said as I turned away. For what it's worth, you didn't deserve any of this. I didn't answer. Because I already knew that. But now, I had proof. Real proof. And it wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. For me. For my kids. For anyone still wondering if I had overreacted. It was the middle of her custody week when the boys came back early. I wasn't expecting them until Sunday evening, but around lunchtime on Saturday, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, Jonah was standing there with his backpack already slung over one shoulder. Max was a few steps behind him, arms crossed tight across his chest. We want to come home, Max said. No hesitation. No small talk. I stepped aside without saying a word and watched them walk in like they were returning from a long, uncomfortable trip. Jonah dropped his bag on the floor and went straight for the dog bed where Scout was curled up. Max sat at the kitchen table and stared out the window like he'd just seen something that shook him. I closed the door and asked, Everything okay over there? Jonah didn't say anything. Max did. She told us it was your fault, he said. Said you were cold. That Bryce was just a friend. That you made up a whole story to turn people against her. I took a breath. What did you say? I asked her why the friend was calling her darling in front of her family. His voice cracked just a little at the end, but he held it together. And what did she say to that? I asked. She started crying, Max said flatly. And then said you'd poisoned us against her. Jonah finally spoke. I packed my bag myself, he said. She tried to stop me, but I told her I didn't want to be there anymore. My chest ached. Not because I wanted them to stay with her, but because they shouldn't have had to make this choice at all. Did she yell? I asked. Jonah shook his head. She just kept saying she was misunderstood. That we don't know what it's like to feel invisible. I sat down across from Max. Do you want to talk about it? No, he said. Then he looked up at me. I just want to be here. That night, my phone rang just after 10. Lillian. I debated answering, but I didn't want her showing up at the house. So I picked up. They left, she said, her voice raw. They just walked out. You told them I poisoned them against you, I said. Because you did. No, I replied calmly. They saw what happened. They heard what was said. I didn't tell them to feel anything. They felt it on their own. She started crying. You always twist everything. No, Lil, I said. You did that. You twisted our anniversary into a performance. You invited another man into our home. And now, you're upset that your children won't pretend they didn't see it. I just wanted to be seen, she said through sobs. To feel something. You were seen, I said. By me. For 15 years. You just didn't like the reflection anymore. There was silence on the other end. I'm not keeping the boys from you, I added. They're old enough to decide what feels safe. If they want to come back, they will. I can't believe they're choosing you, she whispered. They're not choosing sides, I said. They're choosing honesty. That's something you lost when you brought Bryce into this. She hung up without another word. I put the phone down and leaned back in my chair. In the next room, I could hear the boys talking softly, laughing even. They weren't angry anymore, just relieved. And for the first time in months, I felt that too. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. No drawn-out court battle. No messy custody fight. Just signatures, silence, and a lot of paperwork. The judge granted me primary custody, not because I pushed for it, but because the boys made it clear where they wanted to be. Lillian didn't contest it. Not after everything. Bryce didn't stick around long. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that he stopped coming to the botanical center. Word got around town fast. Small towns are like that. No one outright blamed him, but they all knew. And once the drama started, he disappeared like smoke in the wind. I didn't care. He was never the real issue. Lillian tried to rebuild the relationship with Max and Jonah. She sent texts, invited them to lunch, asked if they wanted to come over and start fresh. They went once or twice, quiet, careful visits. But it was never the same. They were polite, but distant. Jonah would always come home and hug Scout for a solid 5 minutes, like he'd been holding his breath and could finally exhale again. Max would go to his room, headphones on, eyes closed, music loud. Not angry, just done. I didn't try to change their minds. I didn't speak badly about Lillian. I just let them feel what they felt. They started therapy about a month after we moved back home. Rena gave me the name of someone she trusted. A quiet, kind man named Dr. Patel who spoke to them like they were people, not broken things that needed fixing. It helped, slowly. And as for me, I went back to work like always. Trees still needed trimming. Trails still needed checking. The mountain didn't care about anniversaries or betrayals. It just kept going. That steadiness helped. At night, we made new routines. Pizza Fridays. Nature documentaries on Saturdays. Max started showing an interest in photography, always asking to borrow my camera for his nature shots. Jonah started helping me build birdhouses in the garage, always making his just a little more crooked than mine, but proudly calling it modern. One night, a few weeks after everything was settled, the three of us sat on the couch watching old footage of Yellowstone. Max was curled up with a blanket. Jonah had fallen asleep with his head on my shoulder. I looked around at the quiet living room. No tension, no eggshells, no buzz from a smartwatch lighting up the corner of the room, and I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Sad, sure. A little numb sometimes. But I wasn't walking around with that weight in my chest. Because I had chosen clarity. Chosen peace. Chosen to stop begging for love from someone who'd turned it into a test. And now, I had something better. I had two boys who knew they were safe. Who knew the truth, even if it hurt. Who watched the world shift beneath their feet and still landed on their own too. That night, as I tucked Jonah into bed and turned off the hallway light, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness, but wholeness. And for now, that was enough.